Mathematics and computer science go hand in hand more than you can even think about. And the reason is actually very simple. Mathematics is very deterministic. Putting it into simple terms, 1 plus 1 will always be equal to 2. It means you can predict what will be the sum or the output of a certain calculation. And that is the backbone of how all of the softwares are actually built. Because you have to scale for millions of users. And at that point, you need a lot of predictability. That is how all of the algorithms are actually written. That is how all of your data structures are designed. So it plays a huge part in designing all of these huge systems. In this particular video, we are going to look at some of these mathematical concepts which help to run all of this entire software industry. And I'm pretty sure you will be pretty amazed by it. Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. Let us start at the most basic concept that you can think about, sorting. I know that as soon as you start your programming journey, the first thing that you learn about is sorting. And you learn different methods, how you can do it in the fastest way possible. But why is sorting so important? Let me give you a brief idea about how these systems look like. Let us say you are trying to develop a system which has billions of users. So every time, if you have to look up, you have to scan through all of these billion entries. Now, let us say you have a very fast computer that can scan at 100 million entries per second. Even at that fast speed, it is gonna take up so long just to find a single entry. Just think about it. Even at 100 million operations per second, in the worst case, your machine can take up 10 seconds to find and locate your username. So this is where sorting comes in. And what does sorting do? You have all heard about different sorting techniques. Once you have sorted all of the data, what you can actually do is you can apply the binary search technique. In binary search, what do? You keep on halving your search space. And then just look at it. Just by doing so little operations, you were able to find and locate your username. So what did you do? You applied the binary search technique on a sorted array, and just in 30 checks, you were able to land at your username. You can easily see how this becomes scalable now. Every time you have to locate a username amongst a billion entries. If that is sorted, you can look it up almost immediately in a fraction of seconds using the binary search technique. And that is what I want to talk about here, the power of logarithms. And logarithms help you to determine how many operations it would take. That is how systems are designed. That is the calculation you keep in your mind. So anyone who wants to check, okay, how much time will each lookup take? They just apply log to the base 2 of the number of entries that you have. You are going to get some approximate entry, but you round up that, okay, it will take like 30 operations to locate the username. And that is the beauty of logarithms. And this is very essential when your data scales up very high. If you have a less data, then it really doesn't matter. But as you see your data growing, then this logarithmic scale just becomes flat. It does not take up more time to look up. And you can just think about it. Once you had a billion entries, it took 30 operations. Let us say next year your data doubled. You have 2 billion entries. Then how much time would you think? It would just be one extra operation because you are just halving your search space and then continuing. This is the beauty of logarithms and how you can design and predict that, okay, how much operations will I take? How much compute power will I need? Speaking of which lands you at the next thing I want to talk about. And that is just simple arithmetics like multiplication, division, addition. You might not realize, but it comes in very handy even from the beginning phase. Let us say you are asked a very basic question that, okay, we are building a photo sharing app. So how much do you think it is going to cost? Now, top of your mind, a lot of questions can start to come in that, okay, how many servers will I need? What kind of a storage will I need? What is the budget? So you have to answer all of this question. And in the engineering world, we call this napkin math. It literally means that, okay, you will just try to estimate some of the calculations that will be needed to make this app live. For example, you are thinking that, okay, I'm going to have 10 million users. Each photo will be approximately 2 MB. Storage costs at 2 cents per gigabyte for a month, and you can expect a peak of about 3 times the average. Now, based upon all of these numbers, you can actually start to frame an idea in your mind. You can actually start to write down all of the calculations to determine what it would take to make the app live. So you start thinking about the traffic that, okay, in a day, I'm going to have approximately 100,000 seconds. 10 million users, out of them 10% are active daily, that gives you 1 million users. They do 50 taps each, that means 50 million requests per day, and then you divide it by the number of seconds in a day. So that gives you an approximate of about 1500 requests per second. This is the thing that should come to your mind, how I can start provisioning my server. You have determined I will need 1500 requests per second. So if half of them are posting a photo, that means 500,000 photos per day. Multiplied by 2 MB, that gives you around 1 terabyte per day of storage. If you want to keep everything for a year, it literally means 365 terabytes of storage in an entire year. So just notice what happened. You started from the very first design that, okay, I have these many users. And you're already at an estimate that I will need about 365 terabytes of storage. Now, nothing is free. You have to compute the dollar cost for all of this. So for 365 terabytes, billed at 2 cents per gigabyte, roughly equates to about $7,300 per month. This is a math that helps to determine if the service that you're trying to propose, is it even viable or not? Is this applicable under your budget? This initial arithmetic, this initial design actually helps to understand that will you be even able to scale up this system and even support it? Because creating a big system isn't easy. You have to account for a lot of different things, and a lot of things can go wrong over here. Speaking of things going wrong, there are always a scenario where your APIs may fail, where you designed this app, you designed your photo sharing app, but someday there was some sort of an outage. A lot of people came in and your API just crashed. Let us say this is your payments API and it is keep on crashing. So a simple fix is that, okay, you can just try to catch that exception and try to fix it. But maybe that is not the issue. What is happening is you have a lot of users. So you keep on hammering the API and it never gets a chance to recover. What do you do in that case? You may go to a senior engineer and they may say that, okay, just try to apply exponential backoff. A lot of questions can come to your mind over here. What the hell is even exponential backoff? What the hell does exponent mean? And why will the exponential backoff work? So to answer all of these questions, again, you need the help of mathematics. Because exponent is something that is very, very crazy and it grows at a huge scale. Just try to look at the powers of 2. You will immediately realize how much is the difference between each of the number. So instead of hammering the API, you are now gonna apply exponential backoff. It means in the first attempt, wait 1 second, then 2 seconds, then 4, then 8, then 16, and then 32. So giving this gap allows your API to recover and you are gonna experience a better service. Along with this, add some jitter. Jitter means that along with the exponential backoff, you apply some random variable. With this random value, your API is gonna be much smoother and you will be able to distribute your requests throughout the time with much more confidence. This is where the power of exponents come in. You might have heard about the famous example that if you keep on folding a piece of paper and if you do it 42 times, it is gonna reach the length of the moon. And that is actually true because exponents rise at a very huge scale. Similarly, if you think about the coronavirus, why was it dangerous? Because it was spreading exponentially. Every person could infect 3 other people around them. So that is the power of exponents and it can work in your favor and against you as well. This is something that you should be always careful about. The funny thing over here is, even if you're careful, sometimes if you use the wrong metrics to look at a certain data, it can give you false results and rather false positives. For example, think about the concept of averages. Averages are generally told to be very, very good. That, okay, if you have a class of a lot of people, you can determine the average height. If there are a lot of people at a venue, you can determine the average price of a ticket. So usually averages are very good. It gives you a general curve and you can determine that, okay, what is the story looking like? But when it comes to computer science, averages can give you a very wrong impression of what is actually happening. For example, over here, let us say there are two scenarios. Your API is working fine. So the entire period, you see that, okay, your average response time was 199 milliseconds. You feel that, okay, that is fine and it works for me. On some other day, what happened is some of the requests went very fast, but one of the requests just kept on stuck and it never completed. If you look at the average again, the average might still turn out to be 199 milliseconds. You may feel that, okay, everything is perfect. But behind the scenes, the story is completely different. On a normal day, it feels that 199 means everything is comfortable. But actually, what might have happened is one of the service got stuck and the slowest one actually took a lot of time than the other ones. Your average still shows 199 milliseconds, but the story is completely different. This is where averages are very misleading and the concept of percentiles comes in. You might have heard about percentiles back in your school. You sort your entire data set and then you are gonna look at the different quartiles. You will have a P25, that is the 25th percentile. Then you will have the median or the 50th percentile. Then you have P90 or the 90th percentile. And then you have P99, that is the 99th percentile. Average almost gives you a certain value that is around the median or the 50th percentile. But P99, that is gonna tell the actual story. So try to think like this. You have the same kind of day. Just look at your requests. Everything seems almost balanced except these very bad actors. If you're gonna look at the average or the median, then you will see that, okay, my median is about 100 milliseconds, so everything is fine. But look at P95 and P99. It was 2400 seconds. So this is telling you a completely different story. It is telling you about the customers who are facing an issue. This is telling you about the problem in your system. So these are the metrics that can give you more insights and it helps you to make your system more robust. I'm not saying that completely ignore the averages. Those are also a very good metric to keep a health check on your system. But P95 and P99 can actually help you to fix some of the outliers and some of the edge cases which can give you very poor customer reviews. When you are dealing with millions and billions of requests, you also want to make sure that you distribute these requests amongst a lot of servers so that your servers are not overwhelmed and your service keeps on running. This is the exact concept of a load balancer. And how do you do it? The modulus operator. This is the next mathematical operator that I want to talk about. Basically, how does it work? Let us say you are running in a track, right? You are going in circles and suddenly I ask you, okay, what position of the track you are in? It is very simple maths, right? You modulo it by the total distance and then you get back that, okay, I am in this part of the track. Basically, what are you doing? You divided the track into 4 different quadrants and every quadrant can be obtained by the modulus. Modulus means you take up the track or whatever thing that you're trying to distribute and divide it amongst equal segments. So, for example, if you have a load balancer or a router, it is gonna keep on taking requests as they arrive. It moduluses it by a certain value and distributes it to all of the servers in a equally fashioned way. And it is used almost everywhere. If you look at a clock, you can determine, okay, where do I need to put my hour? If it's a calendar, you get the month. If there are load balancers, you divide it by the number of servers. If it's a database, you can shard it with the number of shards that you have. If you have a hash map, again, you decide, okay, what row will the data go into based upon this modulus value. So modulus is actually very, very simple. You divide it by a certain number and then the remainder tells you what section will it belong to. You can easily see how all of these mathematical concepts help you to build a very robust and a stable system. This brings me to the last part and I find this very, very interesting. This is about percentages. So let me show you a scenario and amuse you a little bit. Let us say you are trying to build up a certain system and you decide that, okay, I found a machine in the market that is giving me 99.9% uptime. You feel very happy that, okay, this is the machine that I will need and it is gonna be very, very reliable. So far so good, right? Your machine works and everything is very, very happy. Now try to think, what does 99% means? It means that if you have just a single server, then your up probability is 99.9%. Perfect, very good. But try to think, what if you have 10 machines and all of them are 99.9% reliable? You will take up the percentage uptime and you are gonna raise it to the power of 10. So suddenly your availability has now reduced from 99.9% to 99.0%. It is very interesting if you think about it. Just by adding more machines, where each machine is 99.9% reliable, gives you some more chances of failure, correct? Because it becomes very tough that all of your machines are up at the same time. Now try to think, 99% is still very good. Let us say you scale your app even more. Now you have 100 servers. So what do? 0.99 now again raised to the power of 10. So suddenly your availability is now 90.5% because there is a very less chance that all of these services are up. Scale this service even higher. Let us say now you have 1,000 servers. You multiplied it by 10. What happened suddenly? 0.9048 and you raise it to the power of 10. Suddenly your availability is only 36.7%. What I'm trying to say is there is only a 36.78% chance that all of your systems will be up. One or the other server is always gonna die. So your 99.9% reliable machine is suddenly not a good performer anymore. And this is the magic of percentages. This is what you should always understand. That at scale, something is always broken. And you must understand it perfectly. This is where the concept of replicas come in. Basically, what you do is, instead of opting for a machine that is 99.9% reliable, choose a machine that is only 99% reliable and take a replica of the same machine. It means that if this machine is down, then the other one can take up its job. So your percentage availability immediately goes up 99.99% available. Basically, every replica that you add, it is gonna add more 9s to your availability. One box gave you 99% availability, two boxes, one primary, one replica, gives you 99.99%. One box with two replicas gives you 99.49% availability. That is what you might have seen in services in AWS as well. They replicate your data to almost 3 different places to get that availability. Even in Hadoop file systems, you have one master and 3 replica nodes. That guarantees that your data stays reliable. Now, let us try to run the same calculation again. When you had single boxes, 99.99% availability, okay. Now, let us say you have 10 boxes. Okay, the availability is still fine. Let us say you have 100 boxes now. You apply the same exponential calculation. In your new scenario, you still have 99.9% availability, but in the other scenario, it dropped. Once you have 1,000 servers, in the previous scenario, it dropped to 37%, but now it is still gonna remain 99.99% available. So that is the beauty of replication. And this is where the concept and understanding of percentages come in very, very handy. Next time, when you're looking at all of these numbers, when someone says that, okay, our services are 99% up, it means that they are allowing themselves 3.65 days of downtime. When it's 99% uptime, it is 8 hours of downtime. 99.99% uptime is 52 minutes, and 3 nines mean 5 minutes of downtime. So this is all the math that you should understand. This is all the math that can help you design better systems. And that is why I say mathematics and computer science always go hand in hand. Out of all of these concepts, which one did you find the most interesting? And what is a mathematical skill that you have yourself applied in any of the programming tasks that you have worked with? Tell me everything in the comment section below and I would love to discuss all of it with you. As a reminder, if you found this video helpful, please do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This really keeps me motivated and I can make more such videos. Also, a huge shout out to all the members who support my channel. You guys really keep me going. As a member, you do get priority reply to your comments and early access to new videos as well. Stay tuned for my upcoming video. Until then, see ya.